Alaska is supposed to be one of the most beautiful places in America. Endless wilderness, untouched land, the kind of place people go to feel free. But if that's true, why do so many people disappear there? And I'm not talking about a few cases. Tens of thousands of people have vanished in Alaska, many without a trace. Planes go missing and are never found. The strangest part is how little anyone talks about it. The deeper you look into these cases, the more it starts to feel like something isn't adding up. If you like my content, please take a second to leave a like and hit subscribe. It really helps support the show. If you're listening on a podcast platform, a quick 5-star rating helps more than you think. And let me know where you're listening from. I always like seeing how far these stories travel. Planes have been vanishing in this region of Alaska for nearly a century, and no one fully understands why. Locals compare it to the Bermuda Triangle. There is one fact that cannot be emphasized enough: Alaska is massive. It's part of the reason why Alaska is known as the last frontier. Much of the state has no permanent human population. In fact, there are large portions where humans have either never set foot, or the last time anyone did was centuries ago. In these parts of the interior, the wildlife reigns above all. The only authority out there are the laws of nature itself. Even someone with the most experience with the outdoors will struggle to survive in the Alaskan wilderness. With its close proximity and even areas within the Arctic Circle, winter temperatures plummet to well below freezing. Arctic hurricanes produce 100-mile-per-hour winds, which travel inland, creating massive Arctic storms which can completely cover vast stretches with snow in only a few hours. It is within Alaska's interior that a strange series of events have begun to cement itself into the world of unexplained phenomena. One key area of interest is linked between Anchorage, Juneau, and Oktiyevik, formerly Barrow, in reference to its infamous brother in Bermuda. Inside the trifecta is a wide mosaic of towering mountains, deep caves, whitewater rivers, and thick forests. In the summertime, these areas can be rather beautiful to explore. During the winter, the beauty doesn't vanish, but the conditions become much tougher. The area may also be a reason for Alaska's high rates of missing persons. When it comes to the Alaska Triangle, its appetite appears to be the same as its Bermuda equivalent: airplanes. Since at least the 1920s, a number of planes have disappeared without a trace in Alaska. One of the most famous examples occurred on January 26, 1950. A U.S. Air Force Douglas C-54D carrying 44 people disappeared shortly after takeoff from Elmendorf Air Force Base in Anchorage. While en route to Great Falls, Montana, an operation nicknamed Mike was initiated using aircraft and personnel from both the American and Canadian Air Force, who were in the area for joint military exercises. The search for the missing aircraft was hindered by other mishaps. Weather conditions were poor, to say the least. Because of the time of the year, the search area was still experiencing hours of darkness from the polar nights. Temperatures were still below freezing, leading to dangerous icing conditions. 3 planes involved in the search, 2 American and 1 Canadian, also crashed while scouring the search area. Thankfully, all of the crews on board survived with only minor injuries. Just shy of a month after the C-54D disappeared, the search was officially called off, with all on board declared deceased. However, there was still no sign of the plane itself, and it remains missing to this day. All that can be determined is the wreckage is likely somewhere in the surrounding area of Snag, Yukon. Because of the lack of new location and tracking technology back in 1950, it doesn't come as a surprise an incident like this could happen. But not even the 21st century has prevented similar cases from appearing. Alan Foster was born in Fairbanks in December 1965 and grew up in Unalakleet, a city on mainland central Alaska's west coast. Alan obtained a degree in aeronautical engineering, working as both a commercial pilot and aircraft mechanic during his life. From the age of 16, he was qualified to fly private aircraft, later being certified as a commercial pilot when he was 19. By the time he reached his 47th birthday, Alan had nearly 9,700 hours of recorded flight experience. At this point in his life, he worked as an air taxi service providing commuters flights between various stops in the state. On September 9, 2013, Alan made a 4,000-mile journey from Atlanta up to Anchorage in a new plane he just purchased. He rested as the aircraft was refueled, and then departed as he was anxious to see his family again. He made contact with Juneau's flight service shortly after takeoff, detailing his route would include a stop in Cordova in case of bad weather. The last known contact with Alan was via radar transponder, showing him to be between the Gulf of Alaska and Malaspina Glacier. After this time, his plane disappeared from radar, and he never again made contact with ground control. a search was called using 6 Civil Air Patrol planes with assistance from a Coast Guard helicopter to conduct a low-altitude search. The Alaska Air National Guard even launched a C-130 to conduct radar scans from higher up. During the investigation, a pilot told the rescue teams he made contact with Allen somewhere along Prince William Sound. He reported the deteriorating weather conditions approaching Cordova. Allen responded by saying he would, quote, hug the beach, a common strategy to prevent pilots from losing sight of the mainland. This is the last known confirmed contact with Allen. Despite the number of personnel and equipment involved in the search, neither Allen nor his plane could be located. Despite his thousands of hours of spotless flying time, something drastically wrong had occurred during his final flight. An investigation by the National Transportation Safety Board was unable to determine a definitive cause for his disappearance, as nothing could be located. Not the plane wreckage, not even the parts of the plane itself were ever recovered. If he had gone into the water, parts of the plane would have washed ashore by now. Had he impacted the ground, it is natural to assume the crash site would have been found quickly. The NTSB currently has another 40 open cases involving missing aircraft in Alaska, with no trace of the planes. It is rather strange to realize how even with modern technology, entire aircrafts can completely vanish from the face of the earth. It was a reality which hit worldwide news when Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 disappeared into the Indian Ocean in 2014. While now uncommon due to changes in technology and regulations, this doesn't mean it's impossible. But for now, our next story shows how easily someone can vanish, even in a crowd. A 66-year-old man joined a famous mountain race in Alaska. Hundreds watched him reach the top, and somehow he disappeared in plain sight. On the coast of the ominously named Resurrection Bay rests Seward, a commercial fishing city. Every 4th of July, the residents have a special way of celebrating the birthday of the United States. On this day, hundreds line up to participate in the famous Mount Marathon race, sharing the name of the mountain, keeping watch over Seward's residents. The race is rather unique compared to other marathons we're more familiar with. For instance, it only covers a distance of 3 miles of running, while most marathons are around 26. This low number is misleading though, as Mount Marathon is considered among the toughest marathons to complete. Participants race up a 34-degree slope to the false summit of Mount Marathon, a 3,000-foot climb over rocky and uneven terrain. Each year, race authorities and emergency workers treat injuries both minor and serious. Even though there have been many recorded instances of racers getting hurt, no one was ever lost during the event. That was until 2012. Michael LeMaitre was a 66-year-old living in Anchorage, originally from New York State. He first arrived in Alaska in 1966 as a student of the State University in Fairbanks. He fell in love with the state and decided to call it his permanent home, getting married and raising 3 children there. Michael loved outdoor activity, from hiking to skiing to various water sports. This was something he passed on to his children and grandchildren. Michael was also active in the community, working at a family support center and as a grief counselor for children in Washington, D.C. On July 4, 2012, Michael stood at the starting line with fellow competitors, anxious to become the next round of runners to complete the legendary climb. The race went off without any major issues. Officials were lined up at several stops along the course, ready to assist struggling runners and provide water in an effort to ward off dehydration. Michael was seen by other runners and race officials just shy of 3,000 feet when the transition from up to down began. As the race was coming to a close and most participants had returned to the center of Seward, Michael was not part of the crowd of celebrations and tired runners. Initially, a small-scale search was put in place, with organizers believing he may have wandered off after completing the race. However, nobody reported seeing Michael cross the finish line, and the last time anyone had seen him was when officials saw him near the summit. Tom Walsh recalled encountering another runner as he was on his way down. According to his account, the man asked him how far he was from the summit. The man gave his bib number as 485, the same one given to Michael at the beginning of the race. As far as anyone knows, this is the last time anyone ever spoke with Michael, as he soon disappeared into the thick fog wrapping around the mountain. State troopers and civilian volunteers began searching the entirety of the course, believing Michael may have seriously injured himself on the mountain. His family flew up from Utah to help, and friends hired private helicopter pilots to aid in the aerial search of the surroundings. Despite hundreds of people involved and over 10 days of searching, Michael was never found. The search was officially called off on July 14th by the Seward Fire Department. The LeMaitre family continued to hold out hope for another 5 weeks, with friends and supporters offering finances for private search parties. Sadly, Michael's wife Peggy eventually told the media she no longer believed her husband was alive. The two were married for 43 years, raised a family together, and now he was gone. Without a reason, without even a single piece to indicate his fate, Michael was taken away. What baffles everyone is his disappearance took place during a major event where officials were at various points along the race route. The face of Mount Marathon where the race ascends is within view of Seward below. In its nearly 100-year history, nothing of this scale had ever occurred during the race. Heartbroken, Michael's family opened a lawsuit against the Seward Chamber of Commerce for negligence and emotional distress. In 2014, both parties came to a settlement. Sadly, there are still no official answers as to what happened to Michael. The same year as the lawsuit, a chance for closure appeared imminent after the remains of a man were located a few miles near Tonsina Point. DNA testing was conducted, but it was revealed they belonged to a 39-year-old from Arkansas, not from Michael. The pieces of bone that were found matched others originally discovered back in 1997, making it completely unrelated to the case. Despite several new searches conducted over the years, neither him nor his remains have ever been found. Only theories into what happened are present. The mountain was thick with fog the day of the race, leading to the most plausible idea that it caused Michael to become disoriented and stray off the route. He either wandered for some time before becoming lost, or fell and injured himself, or worse. The reason his remains haven't been recovered can be explained by how thick the tree growth is, along with a number of steep cliff faces and even crevices people have gotten stuck in. The race was meant to be a tick off Michael's bucket list. Tragically, it became the last thing he ever did, but this next story suggests something much larger may be happening here. 2 members of Congress boarded a small plane in Alaska, and somewhere between takeoff and landing, the aircraft vanished without a trace. Since the 1970s, 20,000 people have gone missing in Alaska. With a population of roughly 700,000, this is an alarming rate. While a majority are ordinary citizens, one case which continues to baffle people involves individuals involved in the American government itself. Hale Boggs was a representative for Louisiana's 2nd District from 1947 until 1973. During the final 2 years of his tenure, he was named the House Majority Leader, an important position. The title holder is responsible for coordinating the various House committees and scheduling the legislative calendar. As the name suggests, it is given to the party who has a majority in the House of Representatives. Boggs was known to have a fiery personality, along with a controversial string of votes during the height of the Civil Rights Movement. Boggs was also on the Warren Commission, which was formed to investigate the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Of the Several Men Committee, Boggs was the most skeptical of its determined lone gunman theory. He clashed with both the CIA and FBI over their reluctance to cooperate with the commission. He also became highly suspicious of J. Edgar Hoover, the then director of the FBI. As the antagonism between the two grew, Boggs made a speech before Congress accusing the Bureau of wiretapping his phones, as well as maintaining detailed records of members of Congress. Needless to say, this further antagonized the FBI's perception of him. As part of his position as House Majority Leader, Boggs made time to help other representatives during their campaign for re-election. During the time leading up to the 1972 elections, he was in Alaska with its sole representative, Nick Begich, who was actively seeking his second term. Begich was in a tight race against opponent Don Young, and Boggs was in the state to offer support for the junior politician. While Begich gained an early victory during Alaska's open primaries, the race became tense during the months leading up to the election. On October 16th, the pair had just finished a campaign stop in Anchorage and were about to board a plane to Juneau for a fundraising event. The two boarded a Cessna 310 aircraft, accompanied by Begich's aide, Russell Brown, and pilot Don Johns. The route is considered difficult due to unpredictable weather during that time of year, combined with overwater portions and tall mountains, averaging above 6,000 feet in height. These features accelerate wind speed as they blow through the various passes through the mountains. As the flight took off, weather was considered unfavorable, but the pilot appeared confident he could make the journey. Hours passed beyond their scheduled landing, but there was no sign of the plane. Radar and radio contact was lost, and soon people began fearing the worst. A joint effort of the Coast Guard, Navy, Air Force, Army, Civil Air Patrol, and civilian volunteers mounted a search for the downed aircraft. 40 military and 50 civilian aircraft became involved in the search, which covered 325,000 square miles, roughly half of the total area of Alaska. At that time, it was the largest search and rescue operation in American history. The following day, members of Congress were informed of the disappearance by the Democratic whip, Tip O'Neill. When Begich's opponent was informed of the situation, he immediately paused his campaign until the plane was found. A total of 3,600 hours of search time was logged. Despite the extensive search and thousands of personnel involved, no sign of the plane and its occupants were ever found. As the weather conditions continued to deteriorate, the search was called off after 39 days. In a strange turn of events, both Boggs and Begich were re-elected to the House, despite their status as missing persons. In 1973, the occupants of the aircraft were declared officially deceased. As of 2026, the plane has still not been found. It is speculated the wreckage lies beneath several feet of dirt and snow by this point. Several issues impacted the search mission. For instance, the aircraft did not possess the now mandatory emergency locator transmitter. At the time, it wasn't a required piece of equipment, but the incident was part of the reason it is now on all aircraft, civilian and military. Several theories as to the reason for the disappearance have floated around. Plane icing is often a contender for the cause, but the plane was equipped with de-icing and anti-icing devices. Furthermore, there was no radio contact made declaring an emergency of any sort, despite several radio stations positioned along the route. This presents two possible scenarios. The plane experienced electrical failures, which impacted the radio itself, or the plane made a rapid dive into the ground, too fast to declare an emergency. In 1980, a man fishing near Hinchinbrook Island located a piece of the plane tail and reported it to authorities. Investigators determined it matched the description of the aircraft carrying Boggs and Begich. Based on their findings, it appeared the part of the tail detached mid-flight, likely resulting in a sudden, irreversible dive. Boggs' grandson, Stephen Sigmund, wrote an article for the Juneau Empire detailing the aftermath of the disappearance. It is his opinion the plane crashed somewhere in the Prince William Sound. If this is the case, the wreckage is below several feet of dark water, scattered on the ocean floor. But still, there were the circumstances surrounding Boggs' sour relationship with the FBI and CIA, and that has led to the circulation of several additional theories. In 1979, author Robert Ludlum published the Mata Raisay Circle, in which it mentioned Boggs was targeted to prevent further investigation into the Kennedy assassination. While a work of fiction, it is based on actual beliefs presented by people over the years. Knowing Hoover's reputation as a hot-headed demagogue, it is unsurprising suspicion would fall upon him. However, there is no evidence to support this claim, and Hoover was already out as FBI director by the time the plane vanished, having suffered a fatal heart attack in May 1972. Boggs' grandson argues the likely cause is mechanical rather than a targeted affair. The area of the flight path is known for its harsh conditions, especially at high altitude. Furthermore, there have been a number of instances of planes going missing in Alaska, only to be discovered decades later. In November 1952, a C-124 was on its way to Elmendorf from Washington State when it was lost from radar. A search was sent out immediately, but was forced to terminate due to bad weather. During the first attempt, crew spotted what appeared to be a section of the aircraft's tail section, but personnel were unable to land due to the weather. 60 years went by, and nothing from the flight was ever recovered. Then, in June 2012, an Air National Guard Black Hawk helicopter was conducting a training mission at low altitude when the crew saw yellow objects contrasting against the white snowy landscape below. The pilots looped around to get another look and discovered the remains of an aircraft scattered on the ice. The crew relayed their findings back to base, giving the location as Colony Glacier, only a short distance from Anchorage as the crow flies. An investigation team was dispatched to the glacier, and it was determined the aircraft was the missing C-124. Based on these findings, investigators concluded the plane crashed into Mount Gannett, rolled down the face of the mountain, before coming to rest on the glacial surface. The crash caused an avalanche to race down and impact into the wreckage, burying the plane until glacial melt finally revealed the remains 60 years later. Amazingly, the aircraft was only 40 miles from its destination, and yet the snow and ice kept it concealed for over half a century. Numerous theories attempting to explain the series of plane vanishings in the Triangle have varied from the plausible to completely out of this world. In what appears to be a tradition for examples of such phenomena, people have hypothesized the planes and their passengers were abducted by UFOs. While this may sound ridiculous to some, locals and visitors alike have long reported witnessing mysterious lights in the sky, and even entire strange aircraft not resembling civilian or military equipment. A well-detailed encounter with a UFO came from Japan Airlines cargo flight 1628, en route from Paris to Tokyo. The flight crew were preparing to make a refueling stop in Anchorage. Tara Ochi contacted the Anchorage Flight Center, who confirmed there were no civilian or military aircraft in the area. Without warning, the two lights appeared directly in front of the plane. Tara Ochi and his co-pilot both described warmth projecting from the lights into the cockpit. They further explained the object flying with them was larger than any plane they had ever seen and appeared to simply be observing. A United Airlines passenger flight made a brief detour to the vicinity to confirm the situation, and when it arrived, both flights witnessed the UFO disappear. Both aircraft landed safely at their respective destinations, both confirming they had seen the strange object. Both civilian and military pilots have reported equipment malfunctions while flying through Alaska, especially when it comes to their compasses. These devices have been known to give false directions of several degrees and even spin wildly around. While believers in UFOs have claimed this is typical with this sort of phenomenon, scientists and geologists have a more plausible explanation. Because of Alaska's location near and within the Arctic Circle, it is within close proximity to the various magnetic poles of the North. The field is strong enough to make compasses and other electronics to malfunction and even become useless. Prior to the wide use of GPS navigation, the disruption by these magnetic fields could result in great confusion of direction and even spatial awareness. Going back to the C-124 crash, it is completely possible the disruption of equipment caused it to drift off course without knowing their actual location. Combined with bad weather, the crew likely didn't see the large mountain they impacted until it was too late. Another factor compounding the issue is the minerals and rocks making up Alaska's surface. Because they react naturally with each other, it causes great fluctuations with magnetic field activity, leading to spontaneous changes. The Alaska Triangle is an anomaly which deserves more attention than it receives. There remains dozens of aircraft still waiting to be found, but will only appear when the snow reveals their final resting place, but some cases hit much closer to home. Erin Gilbert had just moved to Alaska to start a new life. Days later, she went on a date at a crowded festival and was never seen again. She was a young woman originally from Everett, Washington. During her early adulthood, she worked as a model in San Francisco, but appeared ready for a change in both scenery and career. Erin was known as a kind and compassionate person who had dreams of becoming a novelist. Erin's sister Stephanie offered her a chance to have a new experience when she convinced her to move to Anchorage. Stephanie's husband was stationed at Elmendorf Air Force Base at the time, and she believed Erin would enjoy Alaskan life. Erin soon moved in with the couple and quickly found work as a nanny for a family who lived nearby. She planned to save up her earnings to study cosmetology in the near future. Erin also loved the outdoors, so she took advantage of the hiking trails and endless supplies of outdoor activity, fitting in well with her new surroundings. In June 1995, Erin went to a bar in Anchorage for some drinks and to meet new people. There she met a man named Dave Combs, and the two enjoyed a long series of conversations. As she was heading home, she gave Dave her number and waited for him to call. A few days later, the two went on a date to the Girdwood Forest Fair. Erin's family went to bed that night, with Stephanie looking forward to hearing how the date went. The next morning, Stephanie received a phone call from Dave. He asked her if Erin had made it home, but when Stephanie checked the room, Erin was not there. Stephanie and her husband arrived at the fair site and met with Dave. He explained how the night went before. He and Erin enjoyed the event and were getting ready to leave around 6 p.m. Dave claimed his car wouldn't start, and he decided to walk to a friend's house for help while Erin waited by the car. Dave tried for 2 hours to contact his friend, even walking a long distance to locate the home, but was unsuccessful. When he returned to the fair, Erin was no longer in the car, and he couldn't find her inside the fairgrounds. He assumed she got another ride home and didn't know she was missing until he called Stephanie. Stephanie, Dave, and other members of Erin's family searched the area until 1 a.m., but never found Erin. When Stephanie attempted to file a missing persons report, she was told she needed to wait at least 48 hours before a report could be filed. After becoming frustrated with attempts to work with police, Stephanie walked into a local news station and spoke with the journalist present. This finally led officers to take official statements by Erin's family and Dave. Stephanie recalls how slow the response was by the authorities at the time. Despite their continued efforts, Erin remained listed as missing as of 2026. Dave was initially considered a person of interest, considering he was the last known person to see Erin. Investigators eventually searched his car, albeit weeks after Erin vanished, but were unable to find any relevant clues indicating Dave was involved in the disappearance. Stephanie has expressed personal suspicion of Dave being involved. This first arose when she met Dave to help search. According to Stephanie, she felt sick to her stomach with worry, but when she met up with Dave at Girdwood, he was eating a hot dog. Of course, this doesn't indicate guilt. People react differently to stressful situations, and the fact is Dave didn't know Erin too well, but Stephanie was Erin's sister. It made sense she would be in a web of anxiety. What also has brought suspicion towards Dave is the length of time he waited before contacting Erin's family. Stephanie is adamant Erin didn't disappear intentionally. She was very close to her family and would not go anywhere without letting them know her whereabouts. Tragically, Stephanie believes Erin was the victim of foul play and did not survive the night. However, despite years of searching, which included police officers, volunteers, search and rescue teams, and experts of the terrain, not a single trace of Erin has ever been found. Unlike the other locations mentioned previously, Erin didn't vanish in an isolated region of the state. Girdwood is only a short distance from Anchorage, as well as a popular tourist destination. While still not a large urban center, Girdwood is akin to cities such as Banff, Alberta, a small permanent population with an influx of resort attendees each year. Interestingly enough, the case occurred within the boundaries of the Alaska Triangle, but it appears unlikely her disappearance is related to others happening in the mysterious trifecta. Stephanie remains convinced Dave was responsible for whatever happened to Erin. She has gone on record as stating Dave has left several of their questions unanswered. Even detectives have said Dave has become elusive, with authorities encountering difficulty contacting him in recent years. However, without physical evidence suggesting otherwise, Dave's involvement remains circumstantial, meaning the accusations have no basis in court. Over the years, Erin's mother and father became overcome with grief, unable to speak about their daughter both publicly and privately. Stephanie, on the other hand, continues to periodically travel back to Anchorage to help look for Erin. She has also agreed to several interviews with news media as a way to maintain public interest in the case. Stephanie and her husband moved back to Everett after his Air Force service ended, but they have still not given up hope Erin's fate will eventually be revealed. While the family has accepted Erin is no longer alive, this hasn't deterred them from seeking out the truth. When it comes to such cases of people vanishing without a trace, the goal in finding them becomes justice, not reunion. If you have any information regarding the case of Erin Gilbert, you can contact Crime Stoppers or the Alaska State Troopers to make a statement. While whatever you saw or heard may appear trivial, it can be the exact missing piece investigators need to break the case wide open. This next story is one of the more disturbing cases. A fishing boat drifted into open water in Alaska, fully engulfed in flames. A family and crew were on board, and none made it out. To this day, what really happened remains unknown. In many minds, Alaska is tied to fishing, but not many know why. Despite its vast land, the farming season is extremely short and harsh, so the state depends mainly on fishing, hauling in roughly 5 billion pounds of seafood each year. It is also one of the most dangerous jobs in the United States, as crews face Arctic storms, freezing temperatures, and rough seas. However, these harsh conditions were not behind a mysterious tragedy from the 1980s that remains unexplained. Mark Coulthurst was a 28-year-old commercial fisherman, originally from Washington State. Starting out as a deckhand as a late teen, Mark eventually found himself the captain of a vessel named Investor. Aside from the successes in his career, Mark was also a family man. He and his wife Irene had 2 young children, with a third on the way in 1982. For Mark, Investor was a literal life investment. His plan was to accumulate enough savings to retire by age 50, while still providing both an income and a potential family legacy. The Investor's primary catch was salmon, a plentiful resource at the time in the Alaskan waters. During the 1982 season, the Coulthurst family and crew, Chris Heyman, Dean Moon, Jerome K. Owen, and Michael Stewart, had just loaded the ship's hold with around 77,000 pounds of salmon and went ashore in the city of Craig. Because of a decision by Game and Fishing to temporarily suspend that year's fishing season, payment was not available up front, so the Investor tied up alongside a fellow vessel named Decade. Mark spent time with his family, while the crew ventured into town for some downtime. In the evening, the Coulthursts went to a local restaurant to celebrate Mark's birthday, then returned around 10 p.m. The crew of the Decade were having a party aboard their ship, and Mark made a quick appearance to wish them good night before returning to his boat. Early the next morning, around 6 a.m., the Decade's crew were rubbing sleep from their eyes when they noticed something peculiar. Through the thick fog enveloping the harbor, the Decade crew saw Investor was no longer tied down, instead drifting away into more open waters. While initially they believed the ship was getting an early start to fishing, it was soon discovered Investor's engines weren't on. Furthermore, Investor had left their tie-down lines behind, not something you want to be without. As the fog intensified, more boats docked in Craig as conditions had become too dangerous to navigate the channel. However, Investor remained drifting towards the proximity of Fish Egg Island. The following day, September 7th, alarm bells were rung after another crew spotted a ship on fire. They radioed the authorities about the emergency, then headed directly to the vessel in distress to provide assistance. As they approached, the crew reported seeing an individual piloting Investor's small skiff. The man went full speed in the other direction. The witness described the individual as young, and he claimed he was going for help. Meanwhile, state troopers arrived at the shore, but were helpless to assist due to not having firefighting equipment available. As the Coast Guard was on its way to the scene, the Investor was now completely engulfed in flames. Eventually, the Coast Guard was able to extinguish the fire, then boarded the destroyed vessel to find survivors. Tragically, it was too late to help anyone left on the ship. In total, 7 of the 8 people aboard Investor were found, burned beyond recognition. This included Mike and his family, along with the crew. The remains of 7 of the 8 occupants were found in the ship's wreckage, with Mark's young son John never found. Investigators examined the scene and quickly ruled the cause of the fire was arson. In a more worrying twist, the bodies were found to have perished before the fire was started, with injuries to their heads discovered. Determining the cause of the demise, and even the identification of the victims was difficult due to the damage caused by the fire. Investigators also found there was an attempt to scuttle the ship. As the seacocks were opened, it is believed the perpetrator was attempting to sink the vessel in deep waters, but when this failed, they set the ship on fire. Based on the coroner's report, the individuals were gone sometime between the night of September 6th and the morning of September 7th. Local detectives enlisted the FBI for assistance, as they had never investigated such a horrific and complicated scene before. Unfortunately, the fire had completely consumed any possible physical evidence. To make matters worse, the Investor eventually sank 6 miles offshore. Despite it being towed to more shallow waters, this left police relying solely on eyewitness accounts of the vessel's state during and after the fire. Police immediately set about finding the young man spotted in the skiff the day of the fire. Nobody witnessed anyone else boarding Investor, other than the Coulthurst and the crew, but detectives believe a 9th individual boarded sometime on September 5th. It is believed this person was familiar with the Investor's occupants and was welcomed aboard. After a 2-year investigation, police arrested John Peel in connection with the crime. John was formerly employed under Mark on another vessel called Kit. By the time he was formally charged, John was living in Bellingham, Washington, was newly married and a father. John's arrest was based on him being acquainted with Mark, having been present in Craig at the time of the fire, as well as calling into the tip line regarding the investigation on 2 occasions. John and Mark were also known to have had a falling out in their relationship. It was claimed John could be troublesome, and Mark eventually fired him from the crew of Kit. During questioning, John took a polygraph test and failed, leading to him being charged. As the trial began, it was quickly discovered all the evidence against John was circumstantial. Character witnesses from the defense described John as incapable of committing the crime. The first trial ended in a hung jury, with the judge chastising the prosecution for withholding evidence that passed doubt on John's involvement. The case was dismissed without prejudice, meaning John could be tried again. A second trial was scheduled for 1988. During proceedings, the prosecution relied solely on eyewitness descriptions, matching John as the vessel's driver. They argued John was aboard the Investor to sell illicit substances, and there was a physical altercation which ended horribly. The trial lasted 6 months, the longest in Alaska's history at the time. In the end, the jury was once again split on a verdict, and John was ultimately acquitted. Soon after the trial ended, John filed a lawsuit against the state of Alaska for wrongful persecution. His legal team had found a police memo which admitted the case against him was entirely circumstantial and most likely unsolvable. Investigators were hoping to get a confession out of him, but when this failed to happen, they charged John anyway. In the end, John was awarded $900,000 in damages. Since then, John refuses to discuss the case with the media. With John officially exonerated, the case went as cold as the icy waters Investor now rests within. No other suspects have been identified, no physical evidence survived, and only vague speculations as to the motive exists. Journalist Leland Hale wrote and published a book in 2018 regarding the case. Based on his own research, He believes there are individuals who know the identity of the perpetrator, but for one reason or another, nobody is saying anything. Others have speculated a possible illegal substance motive is behind the crime, but there was no such substances found on the vessel, and those close to the Coulthursts have said this would be way out of character for the family. Leland also describes this theory as implausible. He noted there were long-running rumors the investor was a good source for the people of Craig to get their hands on, as an assortment of uppers and downers. However, in his years of covering the story, he found the investor was rarely in Craig, instead basing his operations in other locations. Such rumors were not present in the areas investors spent most of its time. When it comes to a crime which involves such complex means of disposing of the scene, there must be a pretty serious motive surrounding the actions of the perpetrator, and yet none of the suggested theories appear to add up. Was this just a crime of passion? Was this a methodical, well-planned deed? What was the reason to target Mark, his pregnant wife, their children, and all the deckhands? Who is the unknown man at the controls, and how did he manage to disappear through all the commotion? All the answers are now entombed beneath the surface of the cold waters of Alaska. Our final story has raised questions for years that no one has been able to answer. Some of the most unsettling cases in Alaska didn't happen out in the wilderness. They happened in Anchorage, the state's largest city. Over the years, several of these cases have remained unsolved, with no arrests and no clear answers. 40% of Alaska's population lives in Anchorage. The city saw a population boom after oil was discovered in Prudhoe Bay. It is also home to many military personnel, most of whom are stationed at Elmendorf Air Force Base and Fort Richardson. However, the city's violent crime rate is higher than both the state and national averages. Shauna Yvonne was 12 years old and recently moved to Anchorage with her mother Rose. Originally from Nunavak Island, the two relocated in order for Shauna to finish school. She adjusted to life in the city slowly, but gained new friends who nicknamed her Twinkie due to her love of the sugary snack. Shauna soon gained a reputation for being away from home, but always came back. She wasn't a typical runaway, just someone who wanted to spend time with friends in a new place. In April 1991, Shauna came home after school, changed clothes, then left to hang out with some friends, but she never returned home. When police were contacted, they initially believed it was another runaway case. However, Rose disagreed. This wasn't Shauna's typical behavior, and she would always return in a few days. This time, she was gone for weeks, without anyone seeing or hearing from her. That June, witnesses discovered a disturbing scene at an abandoned building in Anchorage's downtown. The body of Shauna was found under a pile of garbage and other discarded objects, which were determined to have been deliberately placed to conceal her remains. Detectives investigated the scene, and it was determined Shauna suffered blunt force trauma to the back of the head. The news devastated the community. Shauna was a young girl with a kind heart and dreams of travel. Shauna's best friend Lena told the Alaska news source, quote, "If she would be here right now, you would probably see how wonderful she was." Investigators worked for a year, but despite the numerous physical pieces of evidence, the case went cold. In 2002, detectives were eager to use new forensic methods to obtain DNA left at the scene, but this too proved to not find conclusive results. As of 2026, police have not publicly named a person of interest, and Shauna's family are concerned the case will be forgotten, left to remain unanswered. Alaskan artist Amber Webb included Shauna's portrait as part of a memorial dedicated to unsolved cases in the state. Gang activity in the city has found civilians getting caught in between the various rivalries between different organizations. On November 8, 2003, a group of friends pulled up to a local arcade, ready to spend their change on the machines. The group were students at Bartlett High School and included 15-year-old Ann Sapan. As the group was parked outside, someone began firing shots into the back of the car. The teens tried to take cover, but sustained serious injuries. Ann was critically wounded and was sadly pronounced dead on the scene by first responders. Due to the location of the perpetrator relative to where the car occupants were positioned, none of the witnesses were able to see who had fired at them. No one has been arrested in connection to the incident. Police believe the perpetrator was a gang member either aiming for another individual or had mistaken the car as belonging to someone else. As the years go by, Anchorage has continued to see an influx of unsolved cases. Ian Begich, a Cleveland-born father of two, was working as a sheet metal apprentice. Ian had done time in prison, but was working on turning his life around. which is why he took the job in Alaska. In the latter half of 2017, Ian told a close friend he was offered a similar position back home in Cleveland, and he was preparing to move back. He began selling his items to make things easier and was excited to return to Ohio. In the late evening of October 24, 2016, 911 started receiving calls of shots fired in the area of Government Hill. When officers arrived on scene, they found Ian laying unresponsive at the doors of an apartment building. Sadly, attempts to revive him failed. He was 29 years old. That same night, police responded to a second incident. During the investigation, detectives ruled the two incidents were isolated from each other. To this day, it is unclear why Ian was targeted. He wasn't known to be involved in illegal activity while in Alaska and was actively looking to make a fresh start with his new family, and he recently proposed to his girlfriend. To this day, there are no theories to explain the circumstances around what happened, and the case is still open. On November 4th, 2019, police were given a report of a stolen car. Described as a gray 2008 Mazda 6, it appeared to be a routine theft report, but in the coming weeks, it would take a massive turn. A month later, an officer was sent to investigate an abandoned car, which matched the stolen vehicle's description. More disturbingly, the caller stated they believed someone was inside, and they weren't responding. Officers arrived and found the car, with the body of 27-year-old Lanisha Zimmer. She had signs of an attack all over her body, with particular trauma focused on the upper body. Unlike the other examples we've seen so far, police were able to find an unnamed person of interest through CCTV footage on the night, and at the location of the stolen car, the man was wearing a green and black winter jacket, a backpack, jeans, and what appears to be a face mask. Unfortunately, nobody came forward identifying the man or knew anyone with the same attire. It is unknown if the motive behind stealing the car is related to the homicide, or if both were sudden acts of impulse. The number of unsolved cases in Anchorage isn't exactly unique. There are plenty of places with larger numbers of cold investigations. What makes it noteworthy is due to the small size of the city in terms of population. Crime will always be a part of city life. Even in the years where forensics technology has seen massive improvements, some cases will sadly fall through the cracks. Without having a named suspect, investigations stall, sometimes never to get going again. However, if you know anything about any of the cases we've discussed, please contact Anchorage Crime Stoppers at 907-561-7867. If you know something, don't stay silent. Think about the victims and the need to bring justice to those who did them harm. And now a quick word from today's sponsor. Here's something most people ignore. Public Wi-Fi at coffee shops, airports, and hotels is convenient, but it is not always secure. Every time you connect, your data can be exposed. That's why I use Proton VPN. It encrypts your connection and hides your IP address, so what you do online stays private. It is based in Switzerland with strong privacy laws and a strict no-log policy. If you want to protect your connection, go to protonvpn.com/chills. Using my link helps support the podcast. Before we wrap up, something most people here do not know, I do not just tell stories, I also make music. If you are curious to hear that side of me, my new album Soiskara is streaming everywhere now. The link is in the description. This has been the Chills Podcast. Thank you very much for listening. Please follow me on Instagram at DylanIsChillinYT with underscores instead of spaces, X at YT_chills, and TikTok at chills. This podcast was made in collaboration with Jonah and Karina. Until next time, bye-bye. Chills Podcast, same voice, different nightmare.